Ready, set, art. Abstract, expressionistic style watercolor painting of an animal from Florida. So in previous videos, we did a sketchbook assignment where we had part 1 and part 2 of Florida animals. And it can be native or it can be just commonly found. Like the iguana is not really native, but they have plenty of iguanas there, right? So you pick an animal that you will use for your main project. I am using cardstock for this. It's thicker and it's easier for watercolor, right? It has less ripping if you had used the computer paper. If you are using computer paper, I'm just reminding you that sometimes it tears and you may have to start over. When you bought your art supplies for this class, if you chose not to get cardstock paper because you already have regular watercolor paper at home and you're going to use that instead, that's perfectly fine. It just needs to be a thicker paper so it accepts the watercolor a little easier for you. So let's go over the requirements of this assignment. I'm looking for an animal from Florida or commonly found in Florida, and it can be done portrait style. That means just the head. It could be the whole body or maybe 3/4. What do I mean by that? Hold on, I'll show you from the sketchbook. What if we had just included the top part of the iguana? So that includes the back, this part, and the flap. That would be just fine. Okay, so that deals with the sizing and the composition. Let's talk about colors. You need to use at least 3 colors, and with the 3 colors here, when you look at it, I tried to pick a light, a medium, and a dark. You don't want to pick 3 dark colors, 3 medium colors, or 3 light colors. There needs to be some variation in there value-wise. Value means light to dark, right? And then you're going to outline with a dark color. Due to using primary colors, primary means red, yellow, blue, and I wanted to use black. Now, what if you were using, say, these colors? Would you prefer to use like a blue-violet? Sure, that is fine for an outline. You just have to be mindful of your color choices and how they look together. Then it needs to be dashed in or done in an abstract expressionistic style. So that style means there's movement to it. We see the individual brush strokes. We're not really looking for realism here or blending from light to dark, right? And we're using the glazing technique. That means I put one color down, I let it dry. Then I put the next color down, let it dry. Then put the next color down, let it dry. Same with the black. This way the black does not bleed into your colors. When it bleeds in, that's called wet into wet. So we're going to try to avoid wet into wet so that we can do the glazing technique and you're able to see everything. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I am going to use demonstration purposes. For demonstration purposes, I want to use this computer paper. It's just a little easier, and then that way I'm not wasting my good cardstock. I already did it for the main project. So I have a very light sketch. If it's hard to see, I just want you to show it's very light. I wanted to keep it light because I don't want the graphite or the clay mixing with the watercolor. So if you remember pencils, this tip right here is graphite and clay. So if you were to draw really dark like this and leave it, you've probably noticed in the past if you ever did a marker and went right over it, or watercolor, you see the gray kind of smear into it and there's nothing you could do about it. Now it's there. Well, that's just the clay and the graphite mixing with the marker or the watercolor. So you want to make sure that you erase. And you can see you don't want to draw dark anyway, because then it really leaves this line. And what if you wanted yellow there? Well, then it won't work. So you want to make sure to sketch lightly. All right, so the first step is putting in our light colors. And here's my watercolor pad. As a friendly reminder of watercolor, it's called that because you have to add water to the color. So this is the set I had recommended due to its price point. I will say if you already have a nice watercolor set at home, like say this one's great, but what's nice about it, the reason you spend more money on it besides having more color, there's more pigment there. So you're not going to run out of it as quickly, right? So you have a wider variety of choices and then there's more color. For the type of assignments that we're doing for this semester, I think this will be enough. So if you ended up getting this one, that's just fine. And that's what I'll use for the demonstration. So I already have water in there, but I'm going to add water, right? And you kind of mix it around so it lifts the pigment up and mixes with the water, right? And sometimes if you want to see if it's bright enough, you could test to the side. So I usually have an extra piece of paper to see it's ready to go. All right, so I'm going to dash them in. Some will be short, some longer, and some even longer, right? This helps to create visual interest. And I could keep going, but I think you would get the idea that essentially I'm randomly placing the color. I'm not trying to keep it patterned. Some there's bigger spaces and some they're closer together. So that's like random placement. It's not equal patterns. And then you would get it to the point where we're right here. Okay, so this piece is ready to go for the next glazing technique. It's already dry and I can move on. So I'm going to use red. I'm going to test it here. Looks fine. And I'm going to start dashing them in. And I'm following essentially the same idea. I might start being mindful of where I put it. Mostly if I know that it's lighter in here due to the light coming in, I might not use as much red there. So I just keep doing that. And I would keep going until, you see I had these all pre-dyed, so this would be a nice fast demo. Until I'm right here. Now this is ready for my blue color. I let it dry. Now I can move on with the next color. So I'm going to use a royal blue. I could have used blue violet. It would have worked just fine. But this is what I chose. Okay, so that would have been too thick. So I'm going to add a little water to the side. Okay, so now I'm going to dash in. Now I know that because this is under the jaw, I'm going to use more blue. Why? Because it acts as a shadow. Okay. And then in the eye area, I had forgotten one thing. I did put yellow here so that I can later put blue on the bottom. So the yellow acts as a highlight. And then when I put the blue in, right, kind of acts as a shadow. And then later when I put the black, it will look pretty good. Okay, so just think, oh good, she's going to do that later. All right, and I could keep going, but essentially I'm trying to get to right here. Here I did do the yellow. All right, so I have all the colors in, and I'm ready for detailing the black. Okay, so right there. I'm going to try to use a different brush, see how this one has a tip. All right, so this black was actually dry, so I'm going to lift. I'm adding the water, and I just kind of keep going. And I want you to note that I'm holding my brush at an angle. I don't go like this. Why? Because it's going to bend the bristles, right? And then I'm going to test this side to see if it's pigmented enough. It is. All right, so I'm going to start with the eye. I'm going to just use the tip to create a thin line. Thin. And then as I get over here, I'm going to push the brush down, make it thick, and then thin again. That's my example of what I mean by going from thick to thin here, thin to thick, to help create some dimension. And maybe this part's really thick, right? And then I stop, and I leave a white area right there. Why? Because I'm not creating a cartoon. I want it to be kind of dashed in some areas. I also want to show texturing, so I'm going to go ahead, and sometimes it's nice to go fast. It's all right. So I went a little faster right there. And I like how there's scaling in the alligator. So I'm going to add these kind of shaped squares. They're not complete. I'm kind of dashing them in. Why? Because it's a little artist, abstract, expressionistic look. And then in some areas, I want to add some dots, and this will help remind me that there are scales all over this guy. Essentially, I'm trying to get it to the point that when I'm finished, it looks something like this one. So you can see that I have all my bright colors. I did thin lines, I did thick lines, and I dashed them in so that it didn't look like a cartoon. It was more in that abstract expressionistic style. When you're finished, take a picture of it, upload it into your assignments, and then you'll get your grade. So thank you, and next week we'll try something else.